There are stories in the dark that never learn to die. Names buried in the silence, still calling from the night. Down a road where the cold wind moans past the places nobody goes. Every secret leaves a mark. Every shadow knows the dark. The evidence fades. The questions remain, and somewhere in the dark, the story is still calling your name. Monstrous, where the lost ones leave their trace. Monstrous, where the truth wears someone else's face. Murders, mysteries, secrets untold, hauntings hiding in the code. If you listen close enough, you'll hear the monstrous things. Every town has something buried. Every shadow has a name. This is monstrous.
Listener discretion is advised. Monstrous covers true crime, violence, and other unsettling subject matter that may be difficult for some listeners. Hey, y'all, I'm Carrie.
I'm Momo.
Welcome back, guys, to our horrific case that we're covering. So this is part 3. In total, we're going to have 5 parts for the Green River Killer. Like I said last week, I was going to put 4 and 5 together, but that would have been like an almost 3-hour episode.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I figured it'd probably be best, let's just break it up.
Because I'm cooking right now, so.
Right, so 5 parts total. Once we're done, I think we're going to do maybe a couple weeks of some lighter stuff before we get back to the dark side of the true crime world. Because this case it's large, it's a lot, and I think we all could probably use a little break from the darkness of it for a little bit. You agree?
Yep.
Yeah,
Always.
we'll do some lightheaded stuff, maybe some pre-spooky season because that's coming up. Oh yeah, and I got some good ones cooked up for spooky season. Oh yeah. Okay, so guys, part 3. Hang in there with us for 2 more weeks, and then I'll give you something lighter, like maybe mystery, survival tale, something kind of fun. Okay, if you don't have anything, Mama, we'll dive in.
I'm ready.
This one is probably going to have some stuff that you don't know. Okay. The last time, the Green River Task Force was deep into the investigation, and the body count kept climbing. By the end of part 2, the task force knew about 13 victims, even though the full scale of Gary Ridgway's crimes were still far from being clear. They identified more victims, including Mary Meehan, a pregnant teenager whose remains drove home just how brutal this case had become. They were still chasing suspects, reviewing endless tip sheets, and trying to make sense of the growing pattern of disappearances across the Seattle area. In part 2, they had also received that anonymous letter that seemed to contain details that no one should have known. So Mike Barber turned it over to the task force. They then lifted a fingerprint from it, and John Douglas concluded that it was not from the killer. But what they didn't realize at the time was that Douglas was wrong, and the letter really did come from Gary Ridgway. Now, this letter was just kind of like another piece of the puzzle that was getting more and more bizarre and harder to piece together. And what's crazy is when you dig into this, you see that the press were not helping in this case very much at all. Which, I mean, let's be honest, how often do they really?
Very true.
And the press was making the public feel as though the investigators and the task force just simply didn't care about the case. But that is not true. When just the fact that they created a task force for this specific case, that alone shows you how much they cared. They were genuinely working hard on this case, and they did care a lot. I mean, like we're talking about how Riker joined Bob Kebbell in interviewing Ted Bundy to get information about this. For people who don't know, Bob Kebbell was an instrumental part in the Ted Bundy case. If you know that case, then you know Bob Keppel. Aside from the Ted Bundy case, he also consulted on dozens and dozens of other cases because he's considered just one of the most skilled and talented investigators ever. So he's up there and he knows how to track down a serial killer. He just kind of knows how their minds work. And honestly, he's fascinating. He had actually wrote a book called The Riverman about this specific case and how he talked to Ted Bundy about it. And as you know, we're going to get into it, but he was also trying to get a confession out of Bundy for some of the unsolved cases that they had there in Washington. So he's sitting here, he's doing double time. He's working on this case, but also trying to solve these other ones that have nothing to do with it at the same time. Because he was sure that Bundy was the reason that the 8 murdered women in Washington were killed. He was 100% positive that Bundy did it, but he couldn't prove it. So when he talked to Bundy for this, he's trying to get information out of him so he can get him for those
Clear
8.
those cases.
Yep.
He was already on death row. Come on.
Right. I know, but still, they were still open.
But see, if he confessed to him, that would just close him. He's still going to get death row.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think he just wanted the information to close the cases and bring
Closure to the
closure.
family.
Right, right.
But you never really have closure.
No, not really, but at least they would know, you know? Okay, so this case, the fact that he worked on this is very fascinating. So, like I said, Bob Keppel talked to Ted Bundy for this specific case, and I'll give you something to watch that tells you all about it, along with the book I just mentioned. It's a fascinating part of this entire little thing. So it's a deviation off this case that actually had a little bit of stuff that went into Bundy's mind. And you see that because Ted Bundy, let's be real, he's a piece of shit. He was a serial killer and he was a sexual sadist. So his having a peek into his mind is wild. Now the case is fascinating. All right. But if this letter that they received was genuinely from the killer, which it did end up being that way, it appeared to indicate a very high number of victims, more than the task force even knew about. Now, Riker and the others barely had time to even consider any of this when when their next victim was discovered. And this actually kind of kicked off a wave of some really gruesome discovery that lasted for 3 months. So, like Missy Plager, 19-year-old Lisa Yates had gone missing in 1983. When she didn't arrive to pick up her niece Veronica for a picnic on December 23rd, her family simply thought that maybe Lisa had taken off or, something had come up and she just didn't show up. She had done this in the past, so it was not impossible for her. Veronica later recalled that she was young, that her aunt, Lisa, was young and beautiful. She was gifted, loving, and funny, and she thought she was cool. So she was the cool aunt,
Kind of like you.
I guess.
I mean, you're the cool aunt.
I mean, they all love me, so
More than their own parents, I think.
some of them maybe.
Look at Hannah.
Yeah,
She wasn't even your niece. She's your cousin.
right. But I'm Aunt Carrie to all of them.
Yep.
But I think that's because Hannah started that, the Aunt Carrie thing. But I think
Well, that's because she was so little.
that's what I was gonna say. I think it's because I'm so much older than she is.
Yeah.
It's just that's where her brain went. So now
And that's okay.
all of them, it's Aunt Carrie. Whatever. I don't. Whatever. Just like Brooklyn will always be broccoli for Hannah.
Well, that's like Sarah always called her Lala.
Yep.
And I don't know how the hell they got Lala out of Hannah. But
I don't know. One of
that
those
was
things.
Lala.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, sorry guys. Then on March 13th of 1984, Lisa's remains were discovered in a shallow grave out by Interstate 90, which is not far from where Missy Plager's body had been found. It took several months to identify her remains, but then in late September, Bill Haglund from the Emmy's office was able to identify her using dental records. 1 week later, on March 21st, Bob Van Dyke, who was a groundskeeper for the baseball field near the airport, was startled when his dog came home one afternoon carrying what appeared to be human bones.
Ew.
He later recalled, "I knew what it was, but I hoped it wasn't." This discovery was then reported to police, of course, who searched the area and turned up a complete human skeleton. The medical examiner estimated the victim had been in her early teens, but due to the advanced state of decomposition, determining her exact cause of death was nearly impossible. Based on the condition of her remains, experts estimated that she had died roughly 1 year earlier. And that's the thing that comes up when investigators later consulted Ted Bundy. He noted that several serial killers don't want these bodies to be found. They want to avoid detection at all costs. And that's why this killer went near the airport so frequently. Because even though it was a busy, high traffic area overall, he was tucking the bodies into isolated pockets where no one would ever wander unless they had a specific reason to be there. Now, given the location and the timeline, it seemed almost certain that these remains belonged to yet another Green River victim. But the task force had virtually nothing to go on, and none of the young women on their missing persons list matched the age or description of any early teen girl. So tragically, these remains would sit unidentified and unclaimed as Bones 10 for nearly 40 years. She's just shaking her head. And that's the sad part. Like, this happened when the technology wasn't there.
Oh, yeah. They'd had a
They'd have been able to figure it out like that. But because the technology wasn't there.
or it was in its infancy.
Right, right, right. It her bones sat there for 4 decades. Her family wondered for 4 decades where she was. Yeah. It wasn't until, are you ready?
Honestly.
January of 2021 that a major breakthrough finally happened in this.
Ah,
Working alongside the Keene County Sheriff's Office, the DNA Doe Project used advanced investigative genetic genealogy, which is where they take genes and they build out a family tree from distinct DNA matches. Using this, they were officially able to identify these remains as 14-year-old Wendy Stephens.
mm,
She had run away from her home in Denver in 1983, and that is why she was never connected to any missing persons report because she wasn't from the area. And she is believed to be the youngest known victim of the Green River Killer. So Wendy was a runaway from Denver, Colorado, like I said, and she disappeared in March of 1983. And it's believed that after running away from Denver, she made her way, obviously, to Seattle, where she crossed paths with the killer. By the time all the victims were identified, she had, like I said, she turned out to be the youngest. And the reason that she wasn't identified was, like I said, because she was from Denver. She wasn't from Seattle, so there was no missing persons report for her, which is so sad. So now, given that the killer had a history of dumping multiple victims in one single location, a major search of the baseball fields and the surrounding area was done the following day. And it wasn't long before the search team found yet another victim. Seattle search dog handler Chris Clifford said, "These hunts are really depressing." And his dog, he had a bloodhound, and the bloodhound was named Sorrow.
they kinda look like Sorrow if you kinda look at them.
Yep, it's so sad. Like, that's what he named him, was Sorrow. And he, from my understanding, he chose that name because of what he did, because he was a cadaver dog.
Ah, okay, I gotcha.
Yep. So he named him Sorrow. Now the pair were contacted to help the task force with these specific searches. Chris later said Sorrow had this funny reaction. When you find something that's dead, he gets really tentative. He just stops. I came around the corner and I saw him standing there, frozen. Now, Sorrow had discovered the remains of 18-year-old Cheryl Wims, who'd gone missing from downtown Seattle 10 months earlier. So, and unfortunately, it was the night before her birthday that she went missing. Everyone who knew Cheryl had kind of a hard time picturing her ever engaging in sex work. According to her boss at a local restaurant where she worked as a busser, Cheryl was, quote, quiet, conservative, and conscientious, which didn't really immediately ring as a personality that would succeed out on the streets. She was really quiet, and she wasn't the kind of outgoing, put yourself out there kind of girl. Still, her mother did acknowledge that Cheryl had been keeping secrets from her in the most recent months. So she said it's possible that maybe she could have been. She really didn't know. Now, during the time that authorities were examining the location where Cheryl's remains were found, John Douglas, the FBI profile that I've mentioned several times, officially revised the profile for the Green River Killer in late March of 1984. This major update was prompted by a distinct shift in the killer's behavior. Instead of leaving direct victims directly in or along the river, he was now hiding them inland in secluded wooded clusters, such as the site near the North Bend or the area near SeaTac where Cheryl was discovered. Now, the BSU framed the offender as a white male between 25 and 35. He was likely married or living with a partner and operating as a highly organized, methodical necrophile who chose these hidden spots specifically so he could then return to them later repeatedly without being caught. The profiles also the profilers also emphasized that he was a long-term local resident with intimate knowledge of King County's back roads. He drove an unsuspicious utility vehicle or truck. He maintained a quiet, ordinary blue-collar lifestyle and targeted vulnerable women along the Pacific Highway Strip. Most importantly, the, tac- the task force used this refined behavior to build their famous ABC suspect ranking matrix, giving the investigators a vital filter to prioritize thousands of incoming public tips. Now, just 1 week after Cheryl was found on March 31st, yet another dump site was discovered, this time on Star Lake Road. And to the surprise of the task force members, the new site was not actually new at all. This new discovery was just a few dozen yards from where they had found the yet to be identified remains of Gail Matthews only 6 months earlier. So he dumped Gail Matthews, who they have not yet identified, in this location. And then 6 months later, he came back and dumped another victim. So that's why they're finding these multiple bodies, but their decay, the decomposition is severe in one, but not in the other, because he's coming back months and even years after the fact. How wild is that? Like, I don't understand, sir. Anyway. Okay, so at this point, the investigators are like, why did the killer leave the body so close to the road, but dump the others farther into the woods? Like, it doesn't make sense. So now they're wondering, had he been forced to abandon his plan and leave her in an inopportune location? Like, he he didn't want to leave her there because it seems like this is something that happened several times. He goes to a dump site and then the woman's body is just found lying there. So is something happening that's spooking him and which is causing him to just dump and run, basically? Kind of seems that way in a lot of these cases. She's just shaking her head. Now, whatever the reason, the Star Lake Road site turned out to be one of the largest and honestly the most heartbreaking that the detectives had discovered. It is shocking how many remains were found on Star Lake Road. Yards from where Gail's body had been discovered, they discovered the remains of more young women and teenagers. On this road, they discovered the remains of 16-year-old Terry Milligan, who disappeared on August 28th of 1982, 17-year-old Dolores Williams, who went missing on March 8th of 1983, 17-year-old Sandra Gambert, who disappeared on April 17th, 1983, and 18-year-old Alma Smith, who disappeared on March 3rd of 1983, all found in the same location and all taken from the same area. Now, at the same time that this is happening, just off Highway 410, which was just a short distance from the Star Lake site, they found yet another set of remains. Those of 26-year-old Debbie Abernathy, who went missing on September 5th of 1983. So on the same day, they found 5 women.
Jeez.
Now, by the time the by the time that this site was fully excavated and all the victims were recovered, the official count of the Green River victims had skyrocketed just from this one area, with Debbie Abernathy making the 25th confirmed victim, showing investigators that the killer's body count was growing far faster than anyone on the task force had anticipated. Now, Debbie had come to Seattle from Waco, Texas, and had only been in the city a month before she disappeared. She had been performing sex work to support herself, her 3-year-old son, and her boyfriend, Henry Maynard. When Debbie didn't return one afternoon, Henry went and reported her missing. That spring, she was among the remains that Bill Haglund identified through dental records. Now, the discovery of the latest dump site confirmed the task force theory that the killer had preferred dump sites that he could go back to. Once he found one, he used it to his fullest extent. So we started with the Green River, then the vacant lots around the airport, then the area around Highway 410, and most recently, the baseball field at Star Lake Road. Still, the question kept nagging at them. Where was he keeping the remains before he was dumping them? Because in many of these cases, there were several months or even a year between when the victim disappeared and when they were discovered. And in the case of Terry Milligan, it was almost 2 years from the time that she disappeared to when her remains were found. And it's awful to even think about. But, like, it's not like he's preserving them in any kind of way. Most of the rem most of the victims were found as full skeletons.
At least it kept the bodies together.
So it's like, yeah, that'd have been, oh my god.
That'd have been nasty.
Yeah. But it's like, where are you keeping them before you're dumping them? Because you're clearly not preserving them. And it like I said, it's awful to think about, but it's like, what is happening here? You know? Okay. Then, if the dates of the disappearances could be stand-ins for the times of death, which a lot of them, that's all they had to go on, he also appeared to be taking victims in clusters. So, for instance, like Gail Matthews, Andrea Childers, Sandra Gamber, and Kimmy Kaiser were all killed within days of one another, with Kimmy and Sandra disappearing on the exact same day. I was like, where the fuck are you keeping these women? Now, this cluster theory was strengthened again when, after the discovery of Alma Smith's remains, the discovery of new victims once again began to slow down. More than a month passed before their next body was discovered. This time on Jovita Boulevard, which is a mile or so, outside King County. On May 26, 1984, two boys walking in the woods in Pierce County were shocked when they stumbled upon the near complete skeleton lying in the brush about 1,000 feet from the road. Now, despite being in a different jurisdiction, Pierce County investigators clearly recognized the similarities between the skeleton and the Green River victim, so they called in the task force right away. Which, thank God, like, this is one of those rare cases where you see jurisdictions working together. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's no pissing contest here, and it still happens today. Like, there's always some kind of pissing contest going on when it's multiple jurisdictions, when you guys could work together. Who gives a fuck who gets the damn credit? Work together, solve the case, figure it out, bam, it's over with. And that's one thing about this case. Multiple jurisdictions, they're recognizing the similarities, they're all working together, and we love it. Okay, sorry. You just keep shaking your head at me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in many cases, the idea of newly discovered victims was a pretty long and arduous process that took months, if not years, to complete due to the level of decomposition and the lack of distinctive features that they could actually go off of. Like, it's hard to identify someone who is mostly or complete skeleton. It really is, especially in the 80s. They didn't have the technology that we have today. That's
No.
that's part of why this case went on for as long as it did. They just didn't have what they needed to put an end to it when it started. And that's the sad part of it. Now, this time though, there was one highly unusual feature on this set of remains that the task force was able to rely on. The victim had dental braces.
Yeah, that was gonna be great.
Yep. And when they checked the missing persons list, none of the young women on the list had braces. It was only after the victim's father. Could you fucking imagine? Oh my God. This was only after the victim's father read about a skeleton in the local paper that he called the task force and reported that he thought the victim was his daughter, 15-year-old Colleen Brockman.
Mm.
So he's reading the paper, sees this description, sees that she has braces, and calls him up and is like, hey, my daughter is missing, and I think you found her. Could you fucking imagine being that man?
Mm-mm.
Oh my God.
Nope.
I think I would die. I would drop dead. Oh my God. So now the ME compared the teeth to Brockman's dental records that her father provided and confirmed that this skeleton was Colleen. Now, Colleen, it turned out, was like many of the other victims who disappeared over the years. She was a bright and friendly young woman who had just developed a defiant streak as she reached adolescence. And it put her in direct and constant conflict with her parents, which is normal.
Right. That's normal for any teenager.
Right.
God knows I've been through it.
Now, just prior to her disappearance in late December of 1982, Colleen had run away from home a few times, only to return just a few days later.
Yeah, most of them aren't gone very long.
Right. Now, the last time she ran away was on December 28th. She took her clothes and some other personal items, giving her father the impression that this time she might not be coming back so soon. Hoping the reintroduction of law enforcement might straighten his daughter out, her father reported her to the police for stealing some of his things, just trying to scare her straight. So rather than reporting her missing, he's like, "Look, my daughter left and she stole some of my things." Just to try one, for the police to go find her.
Right.
Because rather than reporting her as a runaway and them not give a shit, she's now stolen something. She's broken a law. They're gonna go look for her. Which honestly, that's a smart move on her dad's part.
Yes, it is.
Um, and so he's just trying to get her head back on her shoulder. It's a good way to do it, especially during this time.
Mm-hmm.
But at a time when runaway cases weren't taken seriously, even though he reported her for stealing things, the report didn't go anywhere because she was still looked at as a runaway. Now, I hope that these are the kinds of things that they looked at in order to make this change, because you can't ignore runaway cases. Like, it doesn't matter how many times a child runs away. You go find them and you figure out what's causing this child to continue to run away. Some run away simply because they don't want to live under the rules of their parents or their guardian, whatever the case may be. Whereas others, some run away because they're being mistreated and abused at home. You need to figure out what the cause is so you can help them, you know?
And sometimes it's just teenager influence,
Right.
peer pressure.
Mhm.
That's a lot of it.
A lot of them sneak out to go to a party. They're not technically running away.
No, they're being stupid,
Right. So,
like all teenagers.
I hope it's cases like this one that made law enforcement everywhere realize that we need to take these things seriously, because if not, this is how it could end up. Now, among the last people to see Colleen was her childhood friend, Bunny, who was surprised to see how the 15-year-old was living
That
at the
she was
time.
blonde. Well, am I wrong?
You're awful.
Damn, just telling the truth
Speaking
here.
of Bunny, you have to read Bunny Exo's book. It is so
I got
good.
2 books over here I started, haven't even finished
I
yet,
know, it's so good. So good.
but I will.
Yep, I love her.
I will.
I gotta get caught up on her podcast, but it's so good.
I hated they split up though.
I know.
But it's life. I mean,
Right, right. Everybody kinda, and we don't know what happened. There's rumors and, all of that. We don't know.
no.
From the looks of it, they're still close friends, so it seems like maybe it was a
So that's a
mutual
good
thing.
thing.
Right,
And people just need to shut up.
right, exactly. Mind your business. You don't know what was going on behind closed doors. Mind your business.
That's
Okay?
right. What she said.
Yeah, just mind your business. Stay in your lane. Anyway, you gotta read it. Guys, you gotta read the book. It's so good. So good. Bunny said that Bunny said, "She told me what she was doing and I was instantly terrified for her. She seemed really happy with her new life though. And she said that most of the guys were really nice to her, buying her presents and taking her to dinner. She was pretty naive. I think she thought that meant they loved her in some way."
Girl.
Yeah. But you have to remember she's 15. You know what I mean?
I know, but girl.
It's so sad. Like, it breaks your heart,
It
you
does.
know?
It does.
Now, 4 months passed before the next batch of victims were found.
Because she's just a baby.
Oh, yeah. These were the last to be found of 1984. On October 12th, a mushroom hunter in the woods near Enumclaw found the skeletal remains of Mary Sue Bello, almost a year to the day after she went missing.
Mm.
Mary Sue had been placed on the task force missing list in October of the previous year, but she was removed after they received confirmation that she was alive and living in Texas. Faye Brooks told a reporter that a detective in Texas said that he had seen her, though he did not talk to her in early December of 1983. The discovery of Below's body was followed a month later on November 14th with the discovery of the remains of 19-year-old Martina Authorlee, who was reported missing in May of 1983. Now, in 1982, Martina had moved from her parents' home in Tacoma to North Carolina, where she had enrolled into the Army. But just 6 weeks after her enrollment, she was given a medical discharge. The discharge seemed to derail whatever plans she had for herself, and she soon found herself in a little bit of an aimless rut. She then moved to Hillsboro, Oregon, but from that point on, she became very secretive about her life, sharing very little with her family despite keeping in regular contact with them. According to author Anne Rule, you know her?
Oh, I love her. I read that book. You gave me the book to
Yes,
read.
I love Anne Rule. Anyone that has not read her books, you have to go read her books. She's amazing. Amazing author.
Yeah, I gotta read her book.
Oh,
She's
love
just
her books. She has tons of true crime books based on, cases. The one Mama's talking about is her book on Ted Bundy. Oh, love it. Amazing. I have it upstairs with all my other books. Such a good book. You got to read it. I'm just giving out all kinds of book recommendations today, aren't we?
yes, hey, we're good.
So according to author Anne Rule, she told them that she had a job, but they didn't know what she did for work. It turned out she had been supporting herself through sex work. When Christmas came and went, and they hadn't heard from Martina, her parents went and reported her missing. In April, her name was added to the list of missing women. And just like Mary Sue Bello, her remains were found in the woods in Enumclaw. She was identified through her dental records as well. Okay, so now, again, like I said before, Ted Bundy makes an appearance in this case. And I'm going to get into how exactly he does that because honestly, it's kind of wild. So the media was a big foe in this case. They had, the public thinking that the investigators didn't give a shit about the case or the women missing. And that's not the case. They put a lot into this. Some of them ended up hospitalized because of the stress. I mean, you got to think about how long this went on for
I know.
and how many victims that they were finding at each individual scene. It takes a toll.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then to think that they can't do anything about it, like they're doing everything that they possibly can, using everything they have at their disposal, and still can't find anything that points to who's killing these women and young girls. Can't imagine being in that position.
I wouldn't want to be in that position.
Absolutely not. But they went as far as putting undercover cops as sex workers in order to try to lure him out. Like that's how far they we're going to get this guy. Now, obviously, things got bad enough that they were far enough away from getting any kind of real lead that they took an offer from one of the worst men to ever live, and that is none other than Ted Bundy. Dave Recker thought I had to burp, had come to see Bob Keppel for his help because he knew that Bob Keppel, he was the man. He did this shit. All right. If somebody was going to find this guy, it was going to be Bob Keppel. Now, if you've read or know anything about the Ted Bundy case, then you know who Bob Keppel is. He's a great detective. And so Reichert knew that this Green River killer situation was getting out of control, and he was doing everything he could to bring the best minds onto the case. So Keppel was brought in on a lot of cases like this because this was his area of expertise. He had actually been ranked as the lead criminal investigator for the Washington State Attorney General's office. And that's not a title that they just hand out.
No.
So he knew what the fuck he was doing. Now, Keppel had actually, when he was brought in on the case, he had actually become the chief consultant for the Green River Task Force just because of his experience and his knowledge of serial killers. Now, at the time, Bundy was in prison in Florida, and there were still 8 young women and girls who had been murdered in 1974 in the Washington area that were still not labeled as his victims, even though they were. And they would go on to be classified as Ted Bundy victims later, but at the time, they weren't. Bob Keppel, on the other hand, though, knew they were Bundy's victims. He just had nothing to tie him to them. So Keppel, like I said, he knew that, and he couldn't charge him. So he was losing his fucking mind, trying to find something to connect Bundy to these 8 women and girls. These women and girls were Linda Healy, Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Kathy Park, Brenda Ball, George Ann Hawkins, Janice Oak, and Denise Laslin. So those are the women that Keppel is losing his mind over. Now, today, we know that they were Bundy's victims. And if I remember correctly, these were the last 8 to be tied to Bundy. But it could be wrong, so don't quote me on that one. Now, Bundy had actually been the one to reach out to the Green River Task Force. They didn't go searching for him. He came to them. Clearly, he was looking for an opportunity to stay his execution. So he reached out to them in October of 1984 because he had been reading about the Green River Killer murders, and he saw an opportunity. So because of this, in 1984, which Bob Keppel's son had actually stated that in the documentary that I watched, it's called Dialogue with the Devil. It's on Hulu.
Mhm.
I'll link it in the description for everybody that wants to read it, and then I'll show it to you, Mama. He goes like this. This was the beginning of his play to try to make his execution stop. Talking about Bundy.
Well, I figured that.
Yeah, because even though he's a sexual sadist and a heartless fuckhead, he doesn't wanna face, justice for what he did, and he doesn't wanna die, but he won't admit that. So, anyway, so Bundy sent a letter to the task force saying that he had some information that he thought could, quote, "prove useful in apprehending the person or persons responsible for what are referred to as the Green River murders." He also said that he would only help if they didn't tell anyone outside the task force that he was helping. He didn't want media to know, no one. He said this offer had to stay secret to them only. He also said that he would only talk about the Green River killer and nothing else. Now, I think he didn't want anyone to know, okay, that he was scared. He didn't wanna die.
Well, nobody really wants to die.
Right, but if you, look into the case and if you look, like, if you watch the Netflix movie, the one with
Mhm.
Zac Efron, which I loved that movie. It is so creepy how much
I
Zac
think
Efron.
I've seen that.
I think so.
The hell was that?
I've hit the SOS button on my watch.
Oh,
Um, it's creepy how much Zac Efron looks
oh
like
yeah,
Ted
and a
Bundy.
lot of that's makeup though.
No, like, Zac Efron naturally looks that way. Hang on. It is so creepy. Like, his skin tone is different, obviously, but it's called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile.
I think you were the one that told me about it, told me to watch it.
It's such a good. Okay, this is a picture of Zac Efron, like, on the red carpet or whatever, and then a picture of Bundy.
Oh, I know.
How creepy is that? It's like, are you somehow related? Like,
That one surprised me.
it's so creepy. But he did so good in that movie. That was such a good movie. Anyway, sorry guys. Not what we're here to talk about. But he didn't wanna die, and he didn't want the public to know that he was scared. That's what it was. And he's desperately trying to do everything he can to stay his execution. Bundy also said, quote, "We will handle this thing in a straightforward manner or we don't handle it at all." As if he's the only fucking one in the world that could possibly know anything and figure this out. Now, he also knew that Bob Keppel was put on as one of the leads of the task force. And Bob Keppel and Ted Bundy were like nemesis. Keppel saw this letter as an opportunity to not only see if maybe he could get some insight that could help them catch the Green River Killer, because Ted Bundy was also a serial killer, but maybe he could also tease out some information from him about those unsolved cases in Washington. He said, "I can catch two birds, one stone," because serial killers can't help but talk about themselves.
Oh yeah,
They may not do it directly, but they can't help it. So, I'm not gonna lie, I would have swooped up in this opportunity too.
yeah. They gotta talk. They're egotistical.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Uh, the worst part is that it was definitely him having kind of like a free therapy session with this, where he could
He needed it.
right, where he could confess without actually confessing. So, for example, he would say things like, how he felt and all of his motives, what compelled him to do it, but he did it in a way was, "If I did it. If I did
Right,
this,
the
then
third
this."
person.
Yeah, talking about the Green River Killer, but in reality, he's talking about himself. And then he would be like, "I'm only talking about the Green River. That's it. Meanwhile, you're actually talking about yourself, bro." So Bob Keppel and Dave Riker were able to get him to talk about himself without even realizing that he was, which is hilarious. He sat there thinking he was the smartest man in the room.
Yeah, whatever.
Meanwhile, they're pulling shit from him that he doesn't realize they're pulling from him. It's great. You have to watch it.
I think I have.
Oh, I meant this documentary on Hulu. Sorry, the Dialogue with the Devil. That's what I meant. It's great because you see parts of the interview
Mhm.
because it was video recorded. You get to see it. You get to hear him talk. All of that. So it's yeah. So a couple of the things that really struck me in the conversation were they're spooky. Okay, and it really makes you think about things. So one of the things that Bundy said was, "I don't know what it is. If there's something about the Pacific Northwest that seems to encourage this kind of activity." What activity, sir? What is everybody in the Pacific Northwest fucking serial killers or something? Like,
Hello.
right. Something in the air and the water. What's happening?
Some of them ain't too bright.
Right. He also said at one point, I mean, how do you detach yourself and say this guy did these things, which I consider to be horrible and repulsive, and just really try to get into this guy's head? My advantage is that I don't have those barriers. So he's telling, asking detectives, how do you do that?
That's what I don't understand is how they do that day after day. I just couldn't do it.
Right. Like, how do you get in their heads? How do you figure it out whenever you personally find what he's doing repulsive? He's like, I can help because I don't feel that way. You're a disgusting monster and I want to throw punch you. Now, some of the things that they did have to admit, like it was easy for Ted Bundy to come out of this looking like he did provide some kind of insight. But the only reason that he was able to do that is because, let's be honest, he's the same kind of sick fuck that Gary
He's
Ridgway
been there,
is.
done that.
Right.
And before he did.
Right. He's the same sick fuck as Gary Ridgway. That's the only reason that he was able to give any kind of quote unquote insight.
Because he's egotistical and want to talk about what he did or supposedly.
Right. But without admitting that he did it. But yeah, that's the only fucking reason he was able to
We
get.
win. We'll just admit it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like, are you fucking serious, bro?
I know, right?
Yeah. Like you don't want to talk about yourself, but here you are talking about yourself, you know? Okay.
Some people are just like that, honey.
So you can't really give Ted Bundy a pat on the back. All right. Like,
I wouldn't either. I'd rather just slap him and get it over
right.
with.
Exactly. Now, some of the other things that he said did turn out to actually be correct later on. He believed that the Green River Killer had searched these places out where he dumped the victim, and he would do it day and night.
Mm.
This would not be accidental, like him coming and just finding a random place. He said he looked them out ahead of time to make sure he could use it. He said he is likely gone back to these places several times afterward, and he was definitely talking about himself here because he did that multiple times. So it was easy for him to come up with in his head. Oh, he's probably going back to see these victims once he's dumped them because he himself did that. He said that they are likely being killed very shortly after they were abducted, and he does it in the quickest and easiest way possible. He's not getting crazy with it. He's just trying to kill them and then get rid of them.
Nice guy.
Yeah. He pointed out that he will keep, quote, what is working. He's going to keep doing what is working. He pointed out that killing sex workers makes it easier for him simply because they were accessible, along with being harder to investigate from a law enforcement perspective.
True.
Yep. He said he's likely just approaching them like a John or someone, offering money, drugs. He said these women's likely, quote unquote, need these things. He's not threatening. He probably uses a ruse or a lure like Bundy did, because he used his broken arm or I need help with my car,
Right.
coming off non threatening. He said the Green River Killer has an intense, extreme need to do this, which most of them do. He said that doesn't just go away. He said he believed he didn't want to be caught. And like I said, he's been trying to improve on his dump sites. David, they asked him because there were a couple of times where they only found partial remains. So they, one victim, they only found the skull, things like that. So
Yeah, but that could be done due to animal activity too.
yeah, it could. But if you only find a skull, the animals aren't going to take off with the whole body.
Oh, you'd be surprised, honey,
They're
depending on how much wildlife is in the area that they choose.
they're only gonna they're gonna pick up what can fit in their mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So you would find more than just one skull. And not only that, they would search the entire area.
right.
So they would have found at least some of the other remains kind of scattered around. But there were a couple bodies where they only found one bone, and that's it. So they asked him, was it possible that he did that to see if they could find the rest of the body? Like, did he put the head in one place and the rest somewhere else?
That's a good possibility.
Bundy said that he didn't think that was the case. He said that he has plenty of other dump sites, so he doesn't think that's what happened. But yet we just don't know.
Mm-mm.
Now, these are his words. Okay, this is how he thinks. It's disgusting, but it's also how the Green River Killer thinks too. So it's relevant. He said, quote, "If he wants to get his rocks off, he'll go there." Yeah. He pointed out that he felt the Green River Killer was broadening his victim pool to include runaways, which we already know that. The task force later said that they had already come to that conclusion by the time they had spoken to Bundy. Now, they also asked him how long he would do this. And the answer was chilling because he said the Green River Killer was going to do it until he got caught.
Nice guy.
He went further to say, I would keep doing it. So he's basically saying, if you didn't catch me, I would still be killing. He also mentioned that this guy was familiar with the environment that he was quote unquote working in, and that he likely tracked these women from where they worked and where they lived.
Possibly. He may have lived in the area themselves.
Right. He spoke about how the fatal link between sex and violence had clearly been made here, and he said no one can fight that. So he made it seem that once you're in a place that you've linked, violence and sex together, you can't ever get out of it.
Not a lot of therapy.
Right. He said he's definitely going back to the bodies to check out the condition of them or to, quote, get whatever kicks he gets out of it. He mentioned that there were certain levels of possessiveness where the corpse could be just as important to him as the live victim was. He said it was a physical possession and an ownership. So he is describing the Green River Killer, but he's also talking about himself.
Yeah.
Because he did this shit. Now, when asked whether the size of the task force would get to him and, make him slip up, because by this point, the task force has exploded. And so they asked him, if we make this bigger, is he going to get to him? Is he going to slip up? You know? And the Riker said, would it scare him? Make him want to get out of town, slow down, or make him stop completely. Right. And Bundy said that it was entirely possible. But he said, I don't think it's going to make him leave town. He said it was possible that he was actually getting an ego charge out of, quote, beating you people and staying ahead of you.
No, that's the pot calling the kettle black.
Right, exactly. His advice was that anything they could do to make the Green River Killer nervous would be the thing to catch him. Because he said, nervous men make mistakes.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm. He said, make him feel less capable. He said, publicity makes him nervous. And then he said, this is the kicker. You're going to laugh about this one. I don't like my name in the papers.
Too late.
Bro, you fucking loved the publicity.
Oh, yeah. He ate it up for the cameras and the.
Right. Like he was going to go into politics. What do you mean? You don't like the publicity? You ate that shit up, my guy. Like you opted to represent yourself in trial, but you don't like your
And
name
your
in the
ass
papers?
still lost.
Right. Like shut the fuck up, bro.
What's that saying? A man who
Anyone who represents himself as a
is a
fool
fool
for
for a client. Yep. Need I say more?
He didn't. Ted Bundy didn't like the publicity when he got caught.
No.
That's when he didn't like it. But before that, he ate that shit
You
up.
can't have it both ways, my guy.
You can look at the pictures and tell he's loving it. So you can shut the fuck up, my guy. So he said that the Green River Killer didn't like the publicity. And he was most likely right. Like you can see in the pictures of Gary Ridgway, totally different from the pictures of like Ted Bundy.
Yeah, he kept his head down.
Right. Whereas Ted Bundy standing there, tall. Yeah. The Green River Killer did not like the publicity of himself at all.
Sorry, my guy, you did this.
Right. Now, I think it's more like he saw that they weren't getting anywhere, right? And it annoyed him because he had been caught and this guy was the one that they couldn't catch. That's why I think Ted Bundy inserted himself. He was annoyed because they caught him but couldn't catch the Green River Killer. So he's just kind of being an ass, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you remember they were looking at a man named Melvin Foster as one of the suspects?
No.
I think it might have been part one. So it's been a couple weeks. So Melvin Foster was the cab driver and when we first started this.
Okay.
Okay. So now you remember.
Yeah, now I remember.
I think it was part one.
I think it was.
Okay, so
In the beginning.
yes. So Ted Bundy, they asked Ted Bundy what he thought of that guy. And he said that he thought the attention on him was actually giving the real Green River Killer a boosted ego, saying like, oh, look, they don't have anything. They think it's this guy. So I'm free. Which it could have been possible. And that could have been why there was an uptick in the discovery of bodies. Because he could have thought, "Oh, they're looking at this guy. They think it's him, so I can, ramp up what I'm doing." So now this is also where things got interesting during the interview. So you have to watch it. It is so interesting. It's wild. But this is when Ted Bundy's like, "Okay, listen. I can tell you why I did it. I can tell you why he did it." And they're like, "Whoa, why?" Are you ready for his answer?
I'm listening.
Porn.
Corn.
Porn.
Oh, porn. Porn made me do it. Oh, please. That is so
I
sorry.
was just a totally normal guy, and then I watched porn,
Yeah,
and
whatever.
porn turned me into Ted Bundy.
Yeah, whatever.
He's like, "See, it's not my fault. It's not this guy's fault. It's porn."
Yeah, whatever. Whatever floats your
I
boat.
told you,
Fella.
you have to watch this. It's great. So, which okay,
Is it a long movie?
it's a 3-part series, so it's like an episode, like a TV show episode. So you can like watch it in spurts. It's really good. It's great. Okay, now I feel like we can all collectively agree that porn had absolutely nothing to fucking do with why Theodore Bundy turned into Ted Bundy. Okay, he's trying to play victim and get yet another stay of execution. And this claim is timely though, because at the time there was a huge thing going on where people are going after the porn industry. It's affecting our youth, it's corrupting our youth,
Whatever.
it's bad. That kind of thing was going on. So it wasn't good time for him to throw that out there. But we all know he's full of shit.
We're going to blame what's his name?
We're gonna blame the water neck.
That's not who I'm talking about.
Okay, so they just kind of roll their eyes at him, right? And they're like, okay, like, yeah, this isn't gonna help
We
you.
gonna blame Hugh Hefner next?
Right.
Rest in peace.
They're like, this isn't gonna help you, bro. Like, we're not going to know why.
It's the Playboy Bunny's fault.
Yep. Stupid. He was so dumb. So they did the eye roll thing and they're like, all right, my guy.
The bunny made me do it.
Yep. They're like, okay, guy, this isn't gonna help you. Like, we're not gonna know why you're like, I don't know why you're telling me this.
Because he's a sick bastard.
Like, that's they don't say that directly, but that's what they're basically like. Like, okay, sure.
You're a moron.
Right. And they were like, because they had asked him, is there any way that you can think of, just to see what he would say, right? Is there any way that you could think of that we can draw him out of the woodwork? What would you know? It was a, what would Ted do kind of situation, right? Are you ready?
I'm listening. I
Okay.
don't know if I want to, but I'm listening.
He said, all right, it's gonna sound kind of crazy.
Dude, you are crazy.
And in the series, Bob Keppel was like, we braced ourselves for what Ted Bundy found crazy.
That's scary, really.
Ted said, okay, listen, I'm willing to bet that this guy loves slasher flicks. And he said, okay, this is what you're going to do, right? You're going to put together a slasher film festival. Then you're going to go to the film and you're going to record every single person that attends that said slasher film festival. Then you're going to go through and you're going to figure out who it is.
Bundy, you're a moron.
They said, okay, first, we have questions, okay? 1, what the fuck?
What the hell's wrong with you?
2, what exactly is that gonna do? We don't have anything to compare these people to. So how is that gonna help us? Like, we're just gonna see him on film and be like, "Oh, that's him right there. That guy." Like, is he gonna wear a name tag that says, "Hello, I'm the Green River Killer"? Like, be so for real. 3, okay? You can like scary and violent movies and not be a sexual serial murder. That is because I love a good scary movie, okay? I love me a good slasher film. I'm all about it. I always have been. All right. Some of my favorite movies are the old school, Chucky, It, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees. Love them. I'm not a sexual serial murderer.
You weren't last time I looked.
Right. Okay. The two are not mutually exclusive. All right. 4, that is illegal. Like, you can't just go take pictures of people going into a movie with no probable cause and be like, "Oh, this one right here is the Green River Killer. This guy right here."
It don't work that way, my guy.
No. And to bring that to a judge for an arrest warrant, he's gonna fucking laugh you out of the courthouse.
Yes.
Like, so they were like, "Yeah, I don't think we're gonna do that." At one point, Dave Riker, it's like you can hear it on the film, okay? It's great. Dave
I
Riker,
don't know how they did this with a straight face.
I know. I would bust out laughing like he was
I'd laugh right in his face.
like I just can't. Okay.
It's like talking to a 4-year-old.
Right. So Dave Riker was so shocked that he was suggesting this, right? And was like, "You're an idiot." Like and you hear it in the recording. Okay. He accidentally nudged the recorder off the table.
Who did?
Dave Riker. He like knocked the recorder off the table. You can hear it crash to the ground. And then they pick it up and put it back on the table. And then at one point, Bob Kebbell was like, "Okay, I knew one thing about him because he knows Ted Bundy. He knows him better than anybody else. And
Right.
he knows that this fucking twat waffle is all about himself." So he said, "I knew a well placed yawn was gonna get him right back on track. Because at this point,
That's funny.
he's leading them down a useless fucking rabbit hole." So Bob Keppel leaned back in his chair and he let out one little yawn. And Ted Bundy on the camera in the video, he like you can kind of hear like a laugh. And he says, "Am I boring you?"
Well, yeah. Yes,
And
you
that
are.
got his attention immediately. Bob knew one yawn, and this guy's fucking ego would be so crushed at the idea of him being bored that he was going to get right back on track to where they needed him to be. So to Ted asking Bob if he was bored, he's like, "No, I just needed to yawn." And he said immediately after, that it was Bundy was like, "Okay, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go, you're gonna go to a fresh body site, one that he just left the body at. You're gonna put it under 24/7 surveillance. You don't want him to know that you're there or that you've got anything on him. You got to keep it off the radios. You can't let him know that you're going out there." And he said, "You're gonna watch it because he's gonna come back." And they were like, "Bam, you actually gave us something. Great idea." Like this whole thing, and that's what finally. Now, I think they had kind of already had this like cooked up. Like I think they were thinking about it, but they were more just kind of shocked that Ted actually gave them something that was actually good because everything up to this point has just been nonsense.
True.
And I think the yawn is what got him to say this, honestly. I think that yawn is like, "Okay, they're gonna leave. I need to tell them something to keep them here." That's what I think it was. I think it was kind of like a layman's test. Like, should we keep fucking talking to this moron?
No,
You know what I mean? I think that's more of what
because
it
he
was.
is a fucking moron.
So he also ended up saying something being that ended up being true. But again, it was pretty it was about him. But it ended up being true about the Green River Killer. He said that this guy was gonna appear normal to everyone else. He's not gonna strike you as a killer right away, which most of them don't.
No.
In his words, he says, "This guy is not a raving maniac. He's an everyday guy." Now, I love this part because Bob Keppel literally says to him, he goes, "Someday I would love to present you with the profile done on you." Like just the way he says it's just so spicy. You know what I mean? The way he's just like, "Maybe we can talk about your psychological profile one day." It's just spicy. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I know exactly what you're saying.
He's like, like, "Don't forget who you are." But he's saying it without saying it.
Right.
Like, "You're such a big shot helping us right now, but don't forget that you're just as much as a monster as this guy is." And
It's very true.
the way that he says it is just chef's kiss. Love it. Okay. Then Bob was like, "Okay, you know what? What would your profile on this guy be?" So Bundy said he's probably young, in his 30s. He probably has a low paying job that restricts his movement, so he can't leave the area. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's white. He said he may have a girlfriend, but as active as he is, he said it would put a strain on their relationship. So he's likely not holding down a pretty solid one. And they're like, okay, cool. Thanks. Great job. So this did end up helping move things along in the case. Bob Keppel and Dave Riker doing this ended up being a pretty good thing because they did end up going back to him 4 years later in 1988. And they got a couple more things out of him, but is, you know, what, but they got as much as they could from him between those 2 years. Now, this is whenever Ted Bundy decided he was like, I really don't want to die. So I'm going to start just giving information about my case. But the Green River Task Force started off in 1985, the year after they talked to Ted Bundy, in a pretty frustrating position. All right. Now, we're going to cover Ted Bundy at some point. Okay. So he makes an appearance here. I'm not going to go too much into what he tells them about his case, all of that, because we are going to cover him at some point. Now, the time in 1985, when they started off that year, they had 28 victims. They had a handful of vague and pretty conflicting witness statements, but they had no new leads. But there was something else that they noticed that was actually pretty unexpected. The list of missing women had not grown. In fact, as far as they could tell, the most recent Green River victim to be murdered was Lisa Yates in March of 1984. Faye Brooks said that women kept disappearing in the area, but they kept finding them. So, as far as they could tell, in 4 years, they had no new victims. So, initially, there was some speculation that the killer may have just simply moved on to a nearby state, or he could have died. Now, there was a little bit of a period where sex workers being murdered in Portland was going on, and that gave a little more credence to the theory that he had actually just moved on. But it was quickly shot down because detectives looked closely at the individual murders and realized that the killer in Portland was not the same killer that they were dealing with in Washington.
And I mean, it wouldn't be too far fetched because there's not that big of a difference.
No.
Mileage wise.
Yeah, no. But the murders, they were just totally different. There was no way it was the same person. Now, Portland Police Lieutenant Rob Ackle said, well, we've examined each case. And once we get beyond race and prostitution, you're grasping for common denominators. So that was the only thing that matched them up was the prostitution and their race. Everything else was different. Now, the lack of new victims appeared to defy the conventional wisdom that serial killers don't stop killing until they're caught or they die. And the little thing that Ted thought, he had nailed it. Faye Brooks said, we can't assume that he has stopped killing. We've got to assume that he's still in this area and that he could kill again. In the hope of spurring new leads, Brooks repeated the basic profile of the man that they were looking for. He's someone who portrays or exudes an air of trust in order to get the young women into his car. He also likes to drive because of the distance between where the women were last seen and where they were found. And the decreasing calls about missing women and the lack of evidence of the new murders were a positive development here. But if the letter received from the Post Intelligencer was to be believed, there were more bodies out there to be found. He may have stopped killing more people, but there were a lot they hadn't found yet. On March 7th of 1985, an advertisement went out to all King County papers with a photo and description of 15-year-old Carrie Ann Rois, who went missing sometime in the first weeks of June of 1983. At the time of her disappearance, Carrie had been living in a youth home. She had gone through some horrific abuse at the hands of her stepfather.
Mm.
And Carrie Ann had a history of running away. And she had been shuffled around so many times that by the spring of 1983, it was difficult for anyone to say for certain exactly where she had last been seen. Now, Carrie's friend Margaret said, the last time I saw her, Carrie was standing near the Safeway store at Reiner and Genesee Street. She was wearing blue jeans and a tan coat with high brown boots. None of these items were found with her when her remains were discovered out by Star Lake Road on March 10th, just days after the advertisement with her description appeared in the papers. Now, because Carrie's remains were found about 50 feet or so outside the perimeter of the previous Star Lake search zone, task force members couldn't be certain whether her remains had been recently placed in the area or if they had been there before and they were just missed.
Which is a good possibility.
Right. Now, as a result, a second search of the area was undertaken because they expanded it and they searched again, but no other remains were found. Now, around the time that Carrie went missing in June of 1983, another girl, 16-year-old Tammy Lyles, also disappeared from the area around the airport. Tammy was last seen on June 9th of 1983, but no one ever reported her missing. So she didn't make it on the task force list. As a result, when her remains were found in the woods adjacent to a golf course in Oregon in April 1985, there was no reason for anyone to assume that she was a Green River Killer victim.
He transported her down there.
Yep. It wasn't until 1988 that her name would be added to that list, after some of her remains were identified through dental records. More of her remains, which were simply labeled as Bones 20, were placed on a shelf, and they weren't identified until January of 2024. Now, while the task force members continued to search for any new leads that would point them in the direction of a suspect, old victims continued to be discovered. On the 12th and the 14th of June, the remains of Denise Bush and Shirley Sherrill were discovered. These two victims disappeared in October of 1982. They were discovered together in the brush and undergrowth of a vacant lot in a suburb just outside of Portland. Shirley Sherrill lived in Seattle, but she was known to work the streets in Portland regularly. This place in Portland was where sex workers, they would go and hang out, all that, and it was called the Camp. On October 18th, Shirley and a friend went out to lunch at a restaurant in Seattle's International District, but she hadn't been seen since. The friend later said, "The last time I saw Shirley was in Chinatown, and she was talking to two men in a car. She looked really nice that day, and I assumed that she was going to go with them. But then I got picked up, and I never saw her after that." At the end of November, Shirley's mother reported her missing to the police, and a few days later, her name was added to the task force list. Like Shirley Sherrill, 23-year-old Denise Bush frequently traveled back and forth between Portland and Seattle. When the Green River murder started, many of the young women working in Seattle, including Denise, decided to spend more of their time a few hours away in Portland just to see if that distance would help keep them safe. They assumed that it would be less risky. One of the women said of the girls who worked at the camp that all of them had nothing to their names but a pack of cigarettes, motel key, and some change. The last time anyone saw Denise was June 8th of 1982. She was crossing at the intersection of Pacific Highway and South 144th Street, where several of the other victims had last been seen. Now, if the remains belonged to victims of the Green River Killer, it was not even a question at this point. They knew that these two skeletons were victims of his. They were discovered by a war crew clearing an area for highway expansion, and Tammy Lyle's remains were later discovered. It later discovered around the same location, and it appeared to be that similar cluster dump situation that they had found before. But when they were initially uncovered by the bulldozer, the task force was careful not to jump to any kind of conclusions because they were using a bulldozer to dig up the ground. Now, although she had been reported missing by her boyfriend in October of 1982, Denise's friends and associates told investigators that they thought she might have moved to Seattle. Faye Brooks told reporters at this time that Miss Bush is not listed as an official victim of the Green River homicide investigation. It was only after the remains of Shirley Sherrill were discovered the next day that they were comfortable enough with including her in that list of victims. Now, after 3 years and more than 30 victims, the members of the task force had become accustomed to a regular schedule of discoveries, either individual or clustered together. Because of this, it came as something of a surprise when the entire summer passed without a single report of a new discovery or a new death. And they were thinking, okay, is this it? Is it finally over? The answer to that question arrived in the first few weeks of September when the skeleton of 16-year-old Mary West was discovered in a wooded area of Seattle seaward on September 8th. She was discovered by a teacher accompanying a group of students on a field trip.
Oh, my.
Yeah. To the task force members, the discovery of Mary's remains was more than just another victim to add to the list. Having been reported on missing on February 6th of 1985, she was also the first new victim that had been killed since the murders seemed to stop more than a year earlier. So for a little over a year, there was nothing. And then he
And then it
starts back
started
up.
up again.
Yep.
Something set him off.
Yep. That meant that not only was the Green River Killer still dumping bodies and playing his games with the investigators, but he was also still killing the members of Seattle's sex worker community. Now, at the time that she went missing, Mary West was 3 months pregnant,
Aw.
though she had not told anyone yet, so no one knew but her. By the time her body was discovered, her remains had been reduced to nothing more than bones lying at the base of a fire tree. Now, as usual, the ME was unable to identify her cause of death, but he speculated that it was most likely that the body had been in the park for many months. and had simply gone undetected until it was discovered by the students and their teacher on that field trip. Now, at the time, the lack of newly missing or recently murdered victims and the absence of any new suspects or leads led some to wonder whether it was time to just disband the task force altogether. Because at this point, they're not finding anything new. We're paying all this money for a task force that's doing nothing. Maybe it's time to hand it back to Seattle police and let them deal with it. It's kind of the mindset. There was a lot of speculation that was, about what they should do at this point. But the discovery of Mary West remains put any of that speculation to rest. It only reminded people that the killer was still out there, but also that he was still actively taking new lives. So rather than disband the team, their ranks were expanded, not just with the formal assistance from the FBI, but also with the addition of a widely respected homicide consultant, Pierce Brooks. Brooks was a legendary former LAPD detective, famously known for his work on the Tylenol murders and the Onion Field cases. He also spearheaded the creation of VICAP, which is the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. He brought decades of major case experience to help the task force organize massive amounts of tracking data and connect multi jurisdictional serial crimes across state lines. So, this fucking guy, he's an addition you need on your team. You know what I mean? What?
Oh, I'm just looking it up. I think I seen something about this.
Which
Shoot, when
one?
this happened, I wasn't even 3 yet.
Which
And you're
one?
the onion field.
Oh, yeah, that's on my list. We're going to cover it.
This happened I was like I said, I wasn't even 3. Your Aunt Vicky wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, it's an old one.
Mom Vicky wasn't born for like a month later.
Yeah, it's an old one. We're going to cover that one. Then with the Tylenol murders, those both are on the list. We're going to cover them at some point.
That's just crazy.
Hmm.
Joseph Wambaugh wrote the book. Oh, I love Joseph Wambaugh.
Yeah, he wrote a book.
Shout out to you, my man.
Okay, but yeah, Pierce Brooks he's an addition you want on your team. Okay. Now, because the murders had initially all occurred within Washington state, the FBI didn't really have any kind of like direct federal jurisdiction. So that left the primary investigation in the hands of the local authorities. They just kind of were there to help. But the discovery of these new victims across state lines changed everything.
Oh yeah, I think that's called the Mann Act, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure.
I may be
Honestly,
wrong.
I'll have to look it up. Because the killer had now crossed state lines, this was now a federal matter,
Right.
which allowed the FBI to step in and officially designate it as a federal major case. For a task force that had been working tirelessly for years, this was a massive turning point because it brought in much needed federal resources, funding, and extra manpower. At a press conference held in mid September of 1987, King County Sheriff Vern Thomas officially welcomed the FBI's expanded role, telling reporters, "We'll give them every piece of information we have. There's nothing we're going to keep back. It's their decision on how many agents to put on the case and what other resources to commit." So he's like, they can have whatever the fuck they want to have. We're going to catch this fucking guy. After years of spinning their wheels with very little progress, task force spokesperson Faye Brooks echoed his enthusiasm, saying any additional help that could solve this case is appreciated. There are a lot of leads that we can follow up with their manpower. The task force hoped that the addition of Brooks' expertise would finally bring this case to an end. But Brooks was realistic about how tough the road ahead was actually going to be. He acknowledged that the investigation was, as he quoted, one of the toughest cases he'd ever seen, saying, "I'm confident that in my lifetime, police officers will know who the killer is." Though he warned that his presence wasn't going to make things move overnight. The discovery of a more recent victim gave the investigation a fresh surge of energy. But it soon became clear that the 1984 murder of Mary West was not the start of a new immediate spree, but rather an anomaly in the timeline. In fact, nearly 3 more months would pass before any more remains would be found. And when they finally discovered them in late December, they didn't belong to a recent victim, but instead to a woman who had disappeared 3 years earlier in late 1982. On the evening of December 30th, police in Auburn, Washington, about 30 miles outside of Seattle, were investigating a car crash near Mountain View Cemetery, so not far from where Kimmy Pipe was found. And that's where they discovered 2 sets of skeletal remains down the embankment. So had this car crash not happened, they may not have found these skeletons.
Yeah, that's true.
The two skeletons had been moved from the scene and taken to the lab, but there was nothing unique about them that could help investigators identify exactly who they were. So these bones were labeled as bone 16 and bone 17, and they were put on a shelf. It would be decades before anyone learned the identities of either of these victims. But finally, in 2012, bone 16 would be identified as those of 20-year-old Sandra Major. Sandra hadn't been in Seattle very long before she disappeared just before Christmas in 1982. She had come from Rochester, New York earlier that year, but after she left New York, her family had lost track of her. According to her cousin, she was involved in prostitution before she disappeared. The last time anyone saw Sandra, she was climbing into a blue-green pickup truck. A friend filed a missing person report with the Seattle police, but the report, of course, went nowhere. What a shock. And Sandra's name never made it on the task force list of missing women. When they didn't hear from her again, some members of Sandra's family assumed that she'd met the same fate as many of the sex workers did in Seattle at the time. But being on the other side of the country and without any useful information, they'd never spoken to investigators. So now, in April of 2012, the television channel Lifetime ran a special on the Green River case. And it included, with a phone number and a plea for any information that might help identify the remaining unidentified victims. Sandra's cousin was watching that special in her home in New York, and she reached out to detectives for the first time and told them about Sandra. Based on that information, saliva samples were collected from Sandra's brother and sister, which turned out to be a match for bone 16. Finally, they were given a name and a proper burial. The task force member Tom Jensen said, "I just always had a feeling from the beginning she fit the physical description of the victims." The remains known as bone 17, though, would sit on the shelf for another 12 years until a full DNA profile was created in 2023. And it was submitted to three genealogy databases for comparison. The profile came back as a match for a deceased person in Washington, but that individual was adopted through a closed adoption process. So effectively, it was a dead end. It took genealogists several more months to build out a larger family tree, but eventually they came upon an obituary for William Razpotnik. William had died in Juneau, Alaska, but for many years he had lived with his family there in Seattle. It was not the first time that they had seen William's name pop up either. So the investigators at the lab decided to reach out to his wife, Donna Hurley, to present her with a composite image that they created based on what they had for their remains, which it is wild to me that they're able to do that. That is so
Now they can
amazing.
sculpt it.
I know, and it's amazing that you can just look at bones
John List.
and be able to make what they look like. It's
Well,
amazing
nowadays
to
it's all
me.
done by computers.
Yeah, but it's amazing. Computer or person doing it, it's amazing to me that they're able to do that just based off your bones.
Well, everything about your features is based off your bone structure.
Yeah, it's just wow. They're able to. Oh, they most likely had this hair color. Most likely had this. It's wild to me. I love it. Okay. Hurley said it took me a long time to admit that it looked like her. Donna Hurley's 15-year-old daughter, Lori Anne, went missing in Seattle in November of 1982 after the two had gotten into an argument. Lori wanted a horse and promised her mother that all she needed to pay for was the feeding and boarding, and Lori would do the rest. As a single mother raising her two children, the cost of feeding and boarding a horse was just completely out of the question. But that was not the answer that Lori wanted to hear. Donna recalled, "I told her no, and away she went." Donna described Lori as a quote, firecracker.
Sounds about right.
She was interested in everything, loved animals, and she was smart as a whip. She said she could get straight A's without ever opening her books. When Lori was 5, tragedy struck when her father died unexpectedly, leaving Donna to raise the children alone. When Lori reached her teen years, she had become rebellious, getting into fights with her mom, skipping school, a lot of the normal stuff that happened at that age. Donna, when she was gone, filed all the police reports and did everything a parent would do to find their missing child. But when the months turned into years, the pain of loss became too much to bear. Donna and Lori's brother William moved to Juneau, where Donna was raised and her parents still lived. Over the years, she occasionally saw or heard something about the Green River murders in Seattle, but it never occurred to her that her daughter could be one of them. She said, "We were in Alaska. We were so far removed. I was still raising my son. I was trying to push it all out of my mind." Donna was unloading groceries one day from her car in September of 2023 when she was approached by two detectives from King County Sheriff's Office. They told her that they thought they had identified Lori's remains. She said, "I went, oh no," and then I just went into shock. There's no other way to say it. Eventually, she collected herself and invited the detectives into the house. A saliva sample was taken and sent back to the lab where they matched it to the DNA from bone 17. They were indeed the bones of her daughter, Lori. After all the paperwork is done and the remains were transferred, Lori was buried alongside her father at Evergreen Cemetery in Seattle. And that's where we're going to end it for part 3.
Sweet.
Yep.
This one's been a good one.
It's a lot.
I know my brain's going, you're trying to
It
process everything.
it was a lot. This one's pretty heartbreaking. I mean, all the episodes have been heartbreaking.
But this one is because they're identifying the girls, and
right.
a lot of them are teenagers, and
A lot of his victims were really young.
it just breaks my heart.
Yep. There's still a lot more to
Sick
come.
bastard.
Still a lot more to come. 2 more, but I feel like we all could. We need a minute to regroup here before we come back because it's a lot. That's why it's broke up into 5 parts because it's just so much.
Yeah.
And if you're going to cover the Green River Killer,
you got to do it right.
Right. You got to do it all.
I just can't get over Ted Bundy. What an asshole.
I can't with him. Oh
I know.
God. Okay, so next week we're going to be in part 4. And as the investigation stretches into its 4th agonizing year, the body count continues to rise. And the case expands far beyond King County, dragging federal authorities.
I can't wait till part 5.
Yeah.
When they finally catch this creep
guy. This drags federal authorities into a multi-state hunt along the I-5 corridor. We'll look at the FBI's updated 1987 profile, revealing a killer hiding behind the ultimate nice guy mask while secretly studying every move the police make in the press. We'll trace the stories of young women and girls whose identities remained buried in isolated woods for decades, and the maddening political and bureaucratic decisions that nearly tore the task force apart when they were needed most. The bodies were piling up, the task force was shrinking, and investigators were closer to the killer than they ever realized.
Well, don't say no more because you'll give it away.
Yep, that's it. That's it.
Good. I'm done.
Yep.
I'm over it today.
I'm gonna tell you now. They do not catch him in part 4.
Oh, I figured it part 5
Yep, it's
before
gonna
they
be part
catch him.
5. Yep.
That's what I'm waiting for. Let's just skip to right 5.
Yep, I got a good cliffhanger for part 4. I'm gonna leave you on a good cliffhanger. Yeah. I'm gonna leave you
just
on a
skip
good
4 and go right to 5.
There's some stuff in part 4 that I guarantee you don't know. Because I didn't know it. I was shocked.
I lived in Southern California at the time. I didn't give a shit what was going on in Washington and Oregon.
Well, I know. I'm just saying. But now that you're older and you've watched this same kind of stuff. So, spooky season's coming up. I'll be releasing a trailer for that. You're gonna get your normal 2 weeks, just like I've done the last couple of years for spooky season.
Twice a week.
Mm-hmm. We'll have our normal episode Monday and then a bonus on Friday. Yep, that's how we do it for spooky season. I got a couple true crimes that I'm gonna do, some hauntings, some folklore, stuff like that. I've already got cases picked out. But if you guys want a specific thing for spooky season, send it to me because I can swap some cases out. I've done it before, not a problem. I do have one case that I am slowly working on in the background that was sent to me from a listener. I'm slowly working on that. That's going to be a good one. Kind of a frustrating one because there's no answers in that one. So let me see if there's anything else. Oh, I don't know if anyone saw my TikTok or our Facebook post. But I am thinking about maybe doing an official merch drop, possibly.
What kind of merch?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know or who's going to do the merch just yet. I'm just trying at this point. I'm trying to figure out what we would do. T-shirts, cups, stickers,
like I need another
hoodies. What kind of stuff would you guys like me to drop? Mama wants cups. See what we can come up with and, shoot me your ideas. Comment, TikTok message, Facebook message, email. Shoot it. Let me know. We'll see what we can work out and Who knows? When merch does drop, which I don't know yet, maybe your idea will make the cut. Just send your ideas over. Who knows? And that's it. Unless you got anything else.
I ain't got nothing.
Okay. Yep. That's it. Okay. So, guys, until then, breathe in, breathe, find you a good, nice movie. Okay. Watch a show, decompress. Go watch the documentary I'm going to link in the bio or in the description. It's good. So just your case suggestions, whatever you want to tell us, you want us to share something on the show, email us, send it to our socials. All of those can be found in the link tree that is in the episode description, along with our Facebook and TikTok pages. Give us a rate and a review. Make sure your automatic downloads are on as well. And as always, remember to
Watch out for monsters.
don't kill people, and we'll catch y'all next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
There's stories in the dark that never learn to die. Names buried in the silence, still calling from the night. Down a road where the cold wind moans, past the places nobody goes. Every secret leaves a mark, every shadow knows the dark. Hear the footsteps count to 3. Something's waiting patiently. Monstrous, where the lost ones leave their trace. Monstrous, where the truth wears someone else's face. From the graveyard to the crime scene, from the legend to the scream. If you listen close enough, you'll hear the monstrous things. Old photographs and a crooked smile, missing pieces mile by mile. A locked door and a midnight call, a whispered name behind the wall. The evidence fades, the questions remain, and somewhere in the dark, the story is still calling your name. Monstrous, where the lost ones leave their trace. Monstrous, where the truth wears someone else's face. Murders, mysteries, secrets untold, hauntings hiding in the cold. If you listen close enough, you'll hear the monstrous things. Every town has something buried. Every shadow has a name.